Good afternoon and welcome to the COVID-19 Learning Community, hosted by the COVID-19 Command Center and powered by the Joint Information Center. Some housekeeping. Audio. By default, all participants will be muted to minimize distractions. Q&A. Please use the raise hand function at the bottom of your screen. When called on, please unmute your microphone and to ask your question and remute your microphone when not speaking to minimize background noise. When speaking, please announce yourself and speak slowly. You can also enter your questions, comments into the chat panel. Please hold all questions and comments until after the presentation portion of the event. Here's today's meeting's objectives: to review the current state of the SF COVID-19 epidemic and local indicators of hospital capacity, disease situation, and disease control and current testing efforts. To describe COVID-19 vaccine design and clinical trials underway in the Bay Area to test candidate COVID-19 vaccines, and also to highlight community test and respond bright spots. Here's the agenda for today's meeting, and I'll hand it over to Jafria Morris, the Equity Officer of the COVID Central Command. Jafria, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I missed you all last week when I was on vacation, but today is just a super exciting agenda to really understand what's going on with our vaccine work and everything. We are doing really good. I know the mayor pushed back some of the reopening, but as soon as we get more information of reopening, like bowling alleys and other things, we'll make sure to bring that to you all. But definitely happy for today's agenda and hope you all are ready to learn a lot. Thanks.
Now on to our next presentation, and we're really excited to have Rafael Gonzalez, who's a community program manager from Bridge HIV in the San Francisco Department of Public Health, and they have a long history of conducting vaccine trials and HIV vaccine trials, and now turn their attention to COVID vaccine trials. And Rafael, really excited to have you join us, and you have the floor.
Awesome, thank you all so much for having me. Just want to start by letting y'all know, San Francisco native. I feel that that's kind of important to say because oftentimes when we're talking about science and clinical trials, people feel like it's an invader coming in. But I grew up in the SFUSD system. I went to SF State. I worked for the San Francisco Department of Public Health. I grew up going to Giants games when they played at Candlestick Park. So exactly, San Francisco native, not an invader. So I'm going to share my screen. Give me just a sec here. And we're gonna talk about, can you guys see that?
Yes.
Great. COVID-19 clinical trials. So to start right now, as you all know, there's no effective vaccine against COVID-19. We're testing lots of different vaccines to try to find one. And there's tons of reasons why a vaccine would be super helpful. For one, we hope that a vaccine would help to reduce the severity of COVID-19 illness so that people don't get as sick and recover faster. And we also hope that in general, a vaccine could prevent new infections. In preventing new infections, we'd have a healthier community at large. So when we're talking about SARS-CoV-2 or the coronavirus, this is what we're talking about. Under a light microscope, this is what it would look like. And you see kind of around here, it looks like it's wearing a crown. And in Spanish or Latin, crown is corona. So that's where it's kind of derived its name from. This crown is made up of like little spike proteins, and these spike proteins are what can cause infection. And this is how that would happen. So on the left, what you're looking at is the actual coronavirus. And you see that this is the spike protein that I was referring to. And on the right here, you have a human cell receptor. Think about it like a lock and a key sort of thing, where the spike protein of the coronavirus is the key and the human receptor is the lock. So the key is trying to get into the lock. This is what we're trying to avoid. This is what it looks like when the lock and key successfully bind. This is what starts an infection. Again, this is what we're trying to avoid. So how are we trying to avoid that? By having your immune system produce antibodies. So a vaccine would use a synthetic version of what this spike protein looks like to stimulate your immune system to create antibodies that would protect you from this spike protein. So not the entire virus, but rather what causes the infection. And so these antibodies right here are shaped like Ys, where the arms of the Y are what bind to these spike proteins. They neutralize it. And then the body of the Y kind of signals for certain immune cells to come over and digest the entire virus. So you don't have this neutralized virus just floating through your bloodstream. A process happens where it's digested, so it doesn't cause infection. So how do we do this? I should start before getting to the stages of clinical trials. There's preclinical stages where it's in a lab setting, cells, certain animal testing, and then once data is looking promising enough, we move into clinical trial stages. And there's 3 stages. The first stage, at this level, we're working in small numbers, enrolling small numbers of relatively healthy people. And what we're looking at is the vaccine safe? Does it cause any side effects? Once we have enough data that tells us that it is safe, we move into a phase 2 stage. At this level, we're still working in smaller numbers, maybe slightly larger, but at this level, what we're looking at is what would be the best dose regimen of this vaccine. And then again, there's an assessment of data, and if it looks promising, we move into phase 3, which is what I'm going to talk about a little bit later. We are conducting now a phase 3 study. And at a phase 3 level, we are working with big numbers, thousands of people. We want this to look as real world setting type as we can. And so we're looking specifically for people who are at risk. If we enroll thousands of people that are not at risk, we wouldn't actually know that the vaccine is working to reduce the severity of illness or prevent altogether. So what I also want to point out is you've all probably heard in the news that all these studies are moving at a rapid pace, faster than usual. And what we want folks to know is that none of the steps are being skipped. None of these phases are being skipped. We're just changing the structure of how the work is being done, such as doing some steps in parallel instead of one after the other. And we're overlapping some phases, starting the next phase just as soon as we have the safety data collected and analyzed from the previous phase. And it's also important to know that throughout the studies, there's several different groups that oversee these studies and are making sure that all participants are protected. These entities are all independent. And some examples are like the FDA, the NIAID, as well as the DSMB, or the Data and Safety Monitoring Board. There's also a lot of other protocols that have been set in place for the last several decades now to assure that participants are protected. Every study is watched over by an institutional review board. Again, that's an independent body. There's also a participant bill of rights. Throughout the informed consent process, there's about 5 checkpoints before someone can enroll in a study, where it's reiterated to them that this is voluntary, that even once they enroll, if they choose to discontinue participation, that's totally okay. Nothing would happen to the way that they receive care, etc. And there's also an assessment of understanding for all participants to make sure that they understand what the study consists of. The reality is, especially in these times, sometimes people's motivation is money, and that's totally fine, but we need folks, we need to know that potential participants understand the study, because we don't want to take advantage of anyone either. You know, oh, okay, well, this person's interested in the money. They don't totally get the study, so let's just move forward. That's absolutely not what we're trying to do here. So this is what traditional vaccine development looks like versus pandemic vaccine development. At the top, you see that it takes several years for a vaccine to become developed. There's that preclinical development stage, the 3 different phases for clinical trials. And then once we have data after a phase 3 study that proves that it is safe and effective, that the vaccine is safe and effective, this is typically when large scale production happens, once the FDA licenses the product. In this case, because of the nature of, you know, this being very urgent, this is what the vaccine development model is looking like under the pandemic. So an example is, rather than waiting until we have the data from the phase 3 that proves that a vaccine is effective, again, typically that's when the large scale production would occur. Large scale production has already happened. And this is so that once we do get to the point where we've proven that this is effective, we could deploy it very quickly, as opposed to getting to the end and then having to wait for that large scale production. That would delay deploying this product. Now, there is a risk here, obviously, because we could get to the end of a phase 3 study and find out that it does not work, in which case a lot of money and product has gone to waste, but it's really a risk that is worth it, given the urgency and the state of this pandemic. So on New York Times, there's this cool tool that gets updated almost daily. So as of today, it shows you the coronavirus vaccine tracker, how many vaccines are in development. So we know that there's 36 vaccines at a phase 1. Again, that's looking at safety. There's 14 studies at phase 2, looking at what's the best dose of that product. 11 studies, again, these are all worldwide, but there's 11 studies at the phase 3 level looking at, is it effective? And I'll point out that 6 of these 11 phase 3 studies are happening here in the United States. And then there's about 6 vaccines that have been approved for earlier limited use. Something to point out is that none of them are here in the United States. And I believe none of them have finished a phase 3 study, which would prove that it is effective. So kind of a premature deployment of that. So now talking about the difference between active and passive immunity. And the reason why I bring this up is because there's different types of studies happening. So we are working on vaccine studies. This is an example of active immunization. Active immunization is when your immune system is stimulated again to create protective antibodies. Whereas passive immunization is when, rather than your own immune system creating these protective antibodies, the antibodies are external, right? Your immune system is not creating them. So an example of passive immunization is maternal antibodies, breastfeeding. That process, a baby is receiving protective antibodies from breast milk. And that's a natural example. An artificial example are monoclonal antibodies. These are antibodies that have been produced in a lab setting, again, synthetically reproduced, and are given through a sort of IV drip kind of system. So talking about the vaccine study specifically, so this was born out of the COVIPN, or COVID-19 Prevention Network, which we've become a part of. We're inducted now, and we're not the only ones here in the Bay Area. Aside from us, we are working with UCSF and Zuckerberg San Francisco General and EBAC. Collectively, we are working on the same studies. And the mission of the COVPN, or the COVID-19 Prevention Network, is specifically to conduct phase 3 efficacy trials to prevent infection of COVID-19 disease. So the phase 1 and the phase 2, and obviously the preclinical trials, that's being done by other institutions, different entities. And while I said that there's 6 phase 3 studies happening in the US, 5 of them are happening through the COVPN. The 6th one is the Pfizer study, and that's being done outside of the COVID-19 Prevention Network. And like I mentioned, that idea of passive immunization, that has to do with the monoclonal antibodies. And there's several studies that are happening throughout the country, which are focusing in nursing homes, skilled nursing facilities, and also focusing on household contacts. So the COVID-19 Prevention Network is made up of several different networks, some of which we're a part of. So the ones with the asterisk is, these are networks that we're already a part of. So the HIV Vaccine Trials Network, the HIV Prevention Trials Network, the AIDS Clinical Trials Network, and I'm forgetting what the VTEU stands for, I'm sorry. We're not a part of it. I should know that though. But in any case, these different networks, which are all international networks conducting different kind of HIV related research studies, have all come together to form the COVID-19 Prevention Network. This is what it's looking like nationally. We have about 117 sites participating in the same studies. Internationally, we have about 189 sites. You can see that we have sites in North America, South America, and several countries throughout Africa. Of course, studies are being done in other places, such as Europe and Asia, but those sites are not part right now, at least, of the COVID-19 Prevention Network. The good thing about being a part of this network is that we're harmonizing our protocols. These studies aren't being done in vacuums and isolation. They're talking to each other, so the data is being analyzed. It's being captured and analyzed in the same way. So each study right now is slated to enroll about 30,000 participants each. We are estimating a minimum of 50% efficacy in these respective vaccines. Each study that I'm referring to is looking at a different vaccine. Aggressive recruitment timelines. As the community programs manager, I'm responsible for recruitment, engagement, and this is definitely the most aggressive endeavor I've ever been a part of. We are slated to enroll 250 participants at our site alone over the course of 8 weeks. So that's about 40 enrollments per week, unheard of here in our clinic. And so we are enrolling folks who are at least 18 years or older. We are trying to not focus, but definitely pay attention to including folks over the age of 60, as we know that this is a population that is at higher risk for complications due to COVID-19. And again, just the harmonization with processing lab assays as well. I'm showing you all this. I won't go into the different types of vaccines that are being explored, but the reason why I show this is a lot of these models, a lot of these concepts and ideas come from HIV research. So this is why if a lot of the HIV research field has pivoted to also now start doing COVID-19 SARS-CoV-2 research. A lot of, it's an infectious disease after all. So a lot of the concepts that apply to HIV also apply to COVID-19 research. And these are the different studies, different types of vaccines that are underway, that are under investigation. The light red ones are studies happening through the COVPN. This burgundy one is the Pfizer study that's not happening through the COVPN. And all of these are being done throughout the world. And they go under these different type of vaccine strategies. So there's an mRNA strategy, DNA strategy, protein, vector, whole virus. That's like immunology, vaccinology. We could spend lots of time on that. So I'll save it for another time. And then this is what the timeline, the proposed timeline at least, is looking like for the 5 different studies that are happening here in the United States through the COVID-PN. The first study that launched was mid to late July. That was the Moderna study. We here are working on the AstraZeneca study. You may have heard that there was actually a pause on that study. I'll explain that in a bit. Followed by Janssen. There's going to be a Novavax study, and Sanofi, which we will also be conducting as soon as we finish the AstraZeneca study. Again, all of these studies are seeking to enroll 30,000 people in the United States. I think I'll tell you guys now. So at enrollment, so when this begins for all these studies, that's when they receive their first injection. And about a month into it is when they receive their second injection. You'll notice that Janssen, they do not have a second injection, but all the other studies have 2 different, 2 injections. So you get your first one, and then 28 days later, you get your second injection.
Can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
You have a breakdown of the folks that you have in the study? Are they Black, white, Chinese, Hispanic? What's your breakdown?
So here at our site, we just started enrolling participants last week. And so we have 42 participants enrolled. Again, that's super fast for us. And the breakdown right now is looking like 40% Latino, 38% African-American or Black. And then we also have 36% over the age of 60. You're on mute if you were going to say something.
Yeah, I was. I'll wait.
Okay.
I'm just gonna wait.
All right. So in terms of the clinical development for the AstraZeneca study, that's the one we're working on here right now. This particular product, this vaccine is out of the University of Oxford in the UK. There's 4 different ongoing studies being conducted here in the US, in the UK, Brazil, and South Africa. Over 5,000 people have received at least 1 dose. And we do know in the phase 1 and 2 trials that 100% of those that received the second dose developed neutralizing antibodies. So while it was launched, this study was launched back in August, we, like I said, just started recruiting or enrolling rather last week. And that was because there was a suspected, unexpected, serious adverse reaction, also known as a SUSAR, in a participant in the UK. And so they paused the entire study worldwide because the FDA here in the US wanted to review the data. And this just reinforces the fact that while everything's moving very fast, we are not paying attention to the data, right? We want to ensure the safety that is most important. We want to ensure the safety of all participants. So the FDA did a very thorough investigation of the data. And in fact, they wanted to look at past studies that have used a similar strategy of vaccine production just to compare. And as of 2 weeks ago, they lifted the pause and we are once again enrolling. This I've already said, we're enrolling 30,000 people, 250 at each site here in the Bay Area. 2 doses, 1 month apart. The study overall is going to last 2 years. However, over those 2 years, there's 7 visits, 6 in the first year, 1 in the second, and there's lots of communication with our clinical staff. Once a participant enrolls, they expect to be speaking to our clinical staff at least once a week. And then in terms of community engagement, there is a national campaign through the COVID-19 Prevention Network. We're also doing local efforts, such as conducting listening sessions, town halls, just talking to community people in general, folks that are not affiliated with an organization or a clinic. They're just people that, live here. And we've also launched our own website, wecanbeatcovid.org, and in Spanish it's called combatimoscovid.org. And I'll just kind of wrap up by showing you, this is what it looks like when you land on the COVID-19 Prevention Network website. There is a Volunteer Now button, and it's a questionnaire that then includes you into this national registry. These are people that have expressed interest in participating in a study. We have access to San Francisco, the North Bay, and the South Bay, and there's now about 10,000 people that have expressed interest in joining a COVID-19 clinical trial. Our colleagues in Oakland at EBAC, they have access to the East Bay, and they have about 11,000 people who have expressed interest. So collectively, in the Bay Area at large, there are about 21,000 people that are interested in participating in a COVID-19 vaccine. Now, of course, that's great, but not everyone's going to be eligible because tons of people aren't actually at risk. And so while this tool has been fantastic, we also got to be mindful of this digital divide, right? Not everyone has access to Wi-Fi or technology or just like computer and health literacy. So we've also developed our own local campaign where we started by working with Latinx artists based out of the Mission who produced what we hope is a culturally responsive campaign. And you'll see it on Muni in the next 2 weeks. And we're going to be doing lots of canvassing, going door to door, because we don't want folks to get left behind because of this digital divide. And we'll be focusing on canvassing in specific neighborhoods or census tracts that are most affected by COVID-19. And so with that, I thank you all. If you're interested or you have colleagues, you're a part of a network that would be interested in a similar presentation or just having discussion, right? I'm not trying to like sell this study or you all participating or anyone participating. I just think that there's a lot of misinformation. And so I just want to provide spaces for people to engage in conversation around what's going on and receive answers instead of, we can talk to our TVs, but we don't get responses from our TVs. So let me know.
I see in the chat, we have a comment from Veronica. Veronica, do you want to ask your question?
Sure, thanks, Jeffrey. So thank you, Rafael. I'm sure you're aware of the fear that African Americans have of clinical trials in general, yes, just because of the history of the Tuskegee Institute and beyond. Mm-hmm. So what is your strategies to address our communities that have very high mortality rates with this virus? Even though our numbers are low, we're still dying at high rates of this virus. Mm-hmm. So what is your strategies and who are you partnering with?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Veronica. So we have collaborated with a couple of organizations, some faith-based collectives throughout the Bay Area. And you're totally right. I mean, that's the obvious elephant in the room, this medical mistrust because of Tuskegee, Henrietta Lacks, even past birth control experiments. And so we have done several presentations where we focus on that. We can't just shove this conversation of vaccines and how important it is for Black, Indigenous, people of color to participate. We kind of have to address, this history of clinical and medical abuse. So again, that's as basic as that might sound, that's how we've been approaching it, by kind of talking about these obvious things. And having ongoing discussion. There's been several organizations and groups where it's been like a series of presentations, and we start with addressing this history and then moving forward instead of just not addressing that. And we can only give numbers in terms of what our local epidemic looks like to stress the importance of participating. But again, I personally don't think that I'm going to be able to convince people from one day to the next. You know, this is an ongoing conversation. This year has been brutal for communities of color. And so I think it is a tall order to ask people to consider joining these studies. I'm aware, and I push back on, you know, as much as I can on making sure that we're being really respectful of different communities.
Thank you. And then Uzuri.
Okay, so I'm really curious because, so for our African American community, and it seemed like every time, so if I hadn't got on this call, I wouldn't even know about this, right? That's one. And I'm a CBO, right smack dab in the middle of community. The other part is that every time I look, you've already got all these posters. Okay, you already got all these posters and everything ready for one community, yet we're still working on the other community. And it's kind of like the trend that's kind of like.
Oh, you're on mute. Okay.
The trend, no, I muted myself on purpose. So, and then, so we have to fight to get the testing in our community. Yet now it looks like we have to fight. And I don't know about us being in the clinical trials. Me personally, I said I'm gonna wait at least a year before I take any type of vaccine to see whose lip fall off first. But again, you're in our communities with these trials, but yet you were in this, I'm just gonna say, you were in the white folks was getting tested like crazy, but yet for the trial, you got Latino and African American. So I'm trying to figure out, so basically you want the Latinos, African Americans, Samoans, and the indigenous people to be the guinea pigs. I'm just gonna call it what it is. And I no offense if I'm putting it in the wrong way, but this is just, I only have so much time. But yet they're gonna sit back and wait to see if we drop and die or if it really works before they come and get their vaccine. Yet they were getting tested at a very high rate before any of us were, I'm just saying. So I'm trying to figure out how all that works.
That's totally fair. And I can't really, you know, argue with that. You're right. Something that I can do to follow up is look at the data from the phase 1 and 2 studies. Again, I get the sentiment of like guinea pigs and experimentation and whatnot. Unfortunately, there is kind of like different like social constructs with how different communities behave, and there's different risk levels within different communities. And like I was saying, with being able to evaluate whether or not a vaccine is effective, we need folks that have a risk. And so if we were, I mean, and that's not to say specifically that only people of color are at risk. We just need people who are at risk in general.
That right there, what you just said was hella offensive, annoying. I was like, please stop talking, because that didn't do nothing but, excuse my language, piss me off. Because you just said, oh, we need those that are at risk, but you didn't give a damn about us being at risk when you was testing everybody else, and we had to fight to get in our communities in the first place. So what are you saying? We're at risk so you can test on us, but we weren't at risk enough for you to test us in the first place when we were trying to get in our community. Is that what you just said? Because that's how it just sounded. And
no, I would say like, don't kill the messenger. So Rafael, no, I got you. And then that's why we create these spaces for this transparency and to continue to work and have this dialogue. Rafael is the messenger. And this will definitely be continued to talk about, because that's something I think we do need further focus groups to really understand that. And I understand definitely your frustration, Uzuri. And thank you, Rafael, for for really, that's the San Francisco native in you, of being here and opening yourself for these kind of complex questions that community has, you know, as a man of color as well, the different things that impact our community. And so I thank you. And I think if you're open, we would like to call you back later as we continue to work on it at the CCC of our delivery as the vaccines start really going. I mean, right now you have 40 people. And I'm sure you guys are ramping up, like you say, to like 30,000 or whatever, and really be thoughtful in that process and learn more ins and outs. So I want to let everyone know in this group that we'll provide additional information and definitely selections process and everything you're saying will be brought to command about these concerns. Because we definitely understand, I know as an African-American woman, the complexities of vaccinations in communities of color. But I do recognize you are the messenger and not all the way up there on all the decisions that's made. So I super appreciate you. And I don't know if you want to say thank you to everyone, because then I'm gonna move to John.
Yeah, absolutely. And I really want to thank Azuri's points. I mean, she's not wrong. You know, she's not wrong. And I appreciate the messenger moment, but these are things that I want to hear. Again, I'd be a little weirded out if like everyone just said, okay, great, how do I sign up? What Azuri's saying is hella real, you know, and we do need to engage in these conversations. So I thank you.
And that shows he's a damn San Francisco native.
Hey, period. Okay, go
right
ahead.
on, Azuri. So I'd love to follow up. I'd love to follow up with you and get answers to your questions. I don't just want to kind of leave it, you know, I'll never see you again, bye. Like the idea is to keep this going. Again, I'm not trying to convince anyone, but I want to help answer questions.
Right, can you put your email in the chat, because we're running low on time.
Thank you all again.
So much. Yes.
Thank you so much.
And put your, he will put his email in the chat. Please feel free to reach out, community. And then I want to call on John with Samoan. Oh, Dr. Fuqua is going to introduce our next speaker.
All right, thank you, Jafria. Yes, so as we know, one of the things that has been happening on this call is we get the opportunity to highlight community for the incredible work that they have been doing specifically for their community. And I must say it's my pleasure and my honor to announce these individuals, John Enna, Tito Felise, and Patsy Tito, because they came to me a while back ago regarding the importance of getting testing in the Samoan community. And I guarantee you they did not give up until something actually happened. And so they're gonna share with you everything that they have been doing for their community. And I'm just so grateful and so proud to see all the incredible work that they actually are doing. So I will turn it over to them. John, take it away.
Thank you very much, Dr. Fuqua, for that beautiful introduction. On behalf of Patsy and all of the staff here at the Samoan Community Development Center, we want to say talofa. And we want to go ahead and share out our experience with the pop-up COVID testing for our community. This conversation was a conversation that was happening between Patsy and Mr. Freya, and then other folks around the HRC to bring this much needed testing to our communities. With considering all of the news and the reports and data around the COVID down in LA and San Diego, a lot of the Pacific Islanders and Samoans and just people of color in general were at higher risk of getting this virus. So Patsy and Jafria just decided, hey, let's try to bring the testing up here so that our PIs and our Samoans here in San Francisco could also have the knowledge of do they have it or not, and then move forward appropriately and according to whatever the test results were. So we were able to bring the testing to a Samoan Congregational Christian Church right here in San Francisco. It's the second Samoan church that was built in San Francisco. So we knew that this church is well known throughout the Samoan and Pacific Islander communities in the Bay Area. We had just previously had an 8-church conference on Zoom the Sunday before our first week of testing. So we were able to also invite the 8 churches from the different cities that are in our conference, which was Alameda, Sacramento, just around the whole Bay Area. And so after outreaching on those few Sundays, then we were able to also just really saturate the different areas that we serve with COVID testing flyers. And then also all of the care packages that we prepare for the communities that we serve. We also put all of our COVID flyers and COVID materials and education materials inside those care packages in English and also in Samoan, because we know a lot of our the older generation in our Samoan community still speak Samoan fluent and still have not really can definitely read English, but are not comprehending at a level where we want them to be aware of what's going on with COVID. So we were able to educate the community that way, and then just really reach out to our partners in the community and try to encourage our Samoan community and PI folks to just come get tested. They definitely don't want to get tested. Everyone is very scared about getting tested. And I think seeing the older generation in that church show up to get tested, we were able to share that out with our community because some of those elders that came to get tested work in the medical field, have worked for the city and county of San Francisco. So they're already kind of willing to take the test because they've been in processes of these things like this in the past and in their jobs. So they're willing to kind of do the testing. And that helped in encouraging other PIs and Samoans in our community to come and get tested. We're able to also let them know that it's better to know whether you had it or have had it or you don't have it, because then you can definitely move forward with that knowledge. And so that was sort of the mantra that I was spreading out to a lot of folks and our clients, is that it's better you know than not know. Because to be honest with you, many of our Samoan folks that we work with are, I mean, even our closest families we work with, we're sharing a lot of unknowns about this testing. How do we know it works for us? They've tested a lot of other folks outside of the Pacific and Samoan Island, and they're coming up negative. So maybe we should just stay away from this testing, because maybe if we get tested, we might get it because we went there and got tested. So there's a lot of unknowns, and sometimes some of our Samoan professionals that are also in the medical profession sometimes create a wrong, a sort of a scary narrative where some of their families don't want to get tested. So it was kind of a challenge to get them to come get tested, but I felt that the folks that did show up were very positive, and I want to say 90% of the folks that showed up were Pacific Islanders and Samoans. So I know that that was the main focus, was to try to get our Samoan and PI community. And so I'm very proud in saying that it was over 90% were Samoan and Pacific Islanders. And so that kind of just made it worthwhile opening this pop-up site, because we tested 55 the first time, and then the second time we did it, we tested 76. So I believe the week after, we started receiving more calls from community members. Hey, are you guys still doing the testing? So the word was kind of getting out slow on social media and those type of platforms, but it was definitely getting out. The word was definitely beginning to get out. We've been asked again many times, are we gonna have another pop-up? Where will it be? Will it be drive-through? So people are beginning to get interested, especially the families that we work with, because we were able to share it on our social media that we had testing. Some folks wanted to show their faces. So those folks that shared their faces and encouraged people to come in, those people reached out to other family members, and those were members calling us, when's the next testing? But unfortunately, we only had those 2 dates, which was September 16th and September 23rd. And I just want to say that I think if we just kept maybe another 3 or 4 weeks, we probably would have hit about 200, 300 folks to get tested. Because yeah, it was wonderful to see on social media people reaching out to other families. Go get tested, it's free, it's drive-through or walk-through. So those options also helped encourage other families. Our second testing date, because we had drive-through and walk-through. And so another thing is that I already shared this, sorry, but there was a lot of misinformation that kind of went out. So SCDC was pushing out more material in the Samoan language to help educate a lot of our Samoans that were scared and didn't have the right information.
And then just to add to that, what John was saying too, is just all the other sites that we were already supporting with Sunnydale. I know we had folks in Patrol Hill, so we're sending folks to Patrol Hill and then Bayview. But I think just seeing our like community folks' faces out there at the testing sites kind of encourage people to go even more to the Samoan church to get tested for our PI and Samoan folks. And I think that just, you know, just the support, seeing all of us together helping out, that kind of eased the attention of the community, letting them know that we got tested. So we were taking pictures of our own selves getting tested. Patsy also got tested in the video, but I think just standing in solidarity with our community, let them know that this is something that we just want to get more information on and be informed on, that kind of eases their attention about testing. So I think, you know, going about all the different testing sites that we were supporting with helped really encourage folks to use that SF Samoan Church site to get tested. Sorry.
Thank you, guys. And also, I just want to add also, what they did also was Family Day, backpack Family Day. They integrated COVID testing on that day as well, which was very powerful. And also, which they did not mention, but I think it's important to mention is, yes, the testing was a success, but they had to go through some barriers and challenges to get it to happen. And it showed the resiliency and the passion that they actually have for their community to make sure that it showed up and that it actually took place. So they did a remarkable job on that. So really, really appreciated of it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Fuqua. Yes, I kind of left that out. I sorry, missed my thought, but we had a backpack giveaway on a Saturday, that what Dr. Fuqua was saying, and that first test site was our first pop-up drive-through. And so we were able to support families with a backpack and care packages, but also also the opportunity to get tested for COVID. And I believe we tested about 50 folks that Saturday afternoon. And yeah, so that's how the COVID testing went on our backpack giveaway as well. And
Thank you all so much. We are at time, 2 o'clock. I just want to give, just before everyone conclude, is that through this meeting and through this work that we continue to do and support community, I know that you all wanted desperately a learning hub. And through this and working with Director Davis, myself, Supervisor Walton, Patsy, everything, that you all now have a learning hub too. Can you tell us how many kids you guys have before we go?
So we started our high school, middle school learning hub on October 26th. We have 17 enrolled. 3 are non-SFUSD and 14 are SFUSD. And then we have 19 elementary. So we have actually 5 rooms where we're currently holding our learning hubs right now. And we're almost at full capacity. We still have waiting lists for both middle school, high school, and elementary hubs. And we're serving, majority of our students are Pacific Islander and other ethnicities in our hub. And we also are partnering with APAC down the street at 66 Raymond. So we have 2 staff person over there that help out with support with learning hubs with APAC also. And I can't forget our partnership with Boys and Girls Club in Sunnydale and in Mercy Housing that let us use our space for the first 2 weeks. We started our elementary hub in September. So they actually accommodated space for us to start it off. And that was a partnership with Mercy Housing and Boys and Girls Club. So Mercy with Drew and Matt from Boys and Girls Club. And then Rex and Kirsty from APAC.
Thank you all so much. I mean, everybody that attend these meetings are definitely community people in the trenches, truly compassionate, passionate people. And I think that you all come and talk every week to share a bright spot. Next week, I'm gonna ask you, Zuri, I'm gonna put it out there now, to give us a bright spot about Patrol Hill. All right, well, thanks everyone. It is now 2:03. I know my Tenderloin community has another meeting, but please put it in the chat If we don't answer your question or you have more questions, put in the chat and I'll make sure next week's meeting will fulfill those answers. Thank you all.
Thanks, everyone.
Have a wonderful weekend.
You too.
And thank you all for joining the COVID-19 learning community. If you have any questions or needs, please contact equity-neighborhoods@sfgov.org. Thank you and have a nice day.